Have you ever heard of the Nakba, the so-called catastrophe? If you've done any research at all into the Israeli-Arab conflict, you surely would have heard this term, and it was coined to describe what happened in 1948, where Israel fought a war of survival against surrounding Arab armies and won. And as a result, there were 750,000 Arabs that were displaced in this war of survival. People say that's the root of the conflict, and it's the displacement, it's there. The Arabs were kicked out. It's time for us to give the world some clarity about what really happened. Not just what happened, but what the term Nakba actually means. Because if you think that it was just about the displacement that occurred, actually, its real meaning, and the real reason the term was coined, reveals the genuine root cause of the conflict. Have a watch of Einat Wильf talking about this matter.
The ethnic cleansing of Jews from Arab lands has no name. Few people know of it, and it's been kind of relegated to the forgetting of history. The Palestinian story of becoming refugees in war, not unusual situation in the 20th century, has come to be known as the Nakba, the catastrophe. Today it is presented as a story of innocent dispossession, of Palestinians losing their homes, having to escape as a result of the war. The Arab thinker who coined the term the Nakba, Constantine Zurek, made it very clear that the Nakba, the catastrophe of the Arabs, was not about the dispossession. He describes it as 7 Arab armies attempt to subdue Zionism and turn on their heels and go home impotent. The notion is that there is shame, there is humiliation, that the catastrophe is in having failed to defeat Zionism. The catastrophe is not the loss of homes as a result of war. The catastrophe is that the goal of the war, to defeat Zionism, to prevent the Jews from attaining self-determination and statehood in the land, in any borders, the failure to defeat the lowly Jews, the people who were always known as lowly, meek, powerless, the failure to defeat them, that was in real time known as the Nakba.
Yeah, this is absolutely essential if you want to gain some kind of clarity on the Israeli-Arab conflict. This is actually a lot of what it comes down to. The notion is out there that Israel is this colonizing state, and it just jumped onto the land where you had the indigenous Palestinians living there, and they came and dispossessed them all, and that was the great catastrophe. Actually, go study history, go to Wikipedia, and you will see that this land has had a sovereign state there 2 times prior, 2,000 years ago, where it was a Jewish sovereign state in both instances, then has been taken over by various nations and empires, but never had a sovereign state there. And then in the 1800s and 1900s, while the Jews always maintained a presence there, and you had Arabs coming in since the 7th century Islamic conquest, but from the 1800s you started to have Jewish people return in far greater numbers back to the land, but there's no displacement that occurred there. What happened was they purchased land and settled there legally under the Ottoman Empire and then under the British. And so you don't have displacement. There's no displacement. And then the UN says, okay, let's partition the land into a Jewish state, because there's a great precedent for that, seeing as there was one prior. And we'll create an Arab state as well, because there's a lot of Arabs living here as well now. Even though they hadn't really called for any kind of individual nation state, Palestinian nation state. That came later in the 1960s and was very clearly a cynical ploy just to get rid of Israel. But the point is, the proposal, which Israel accepted and the Arabs rejected, didn't need to have displacement. Why did the displacement occur? The displacement occurred because the 7 surrounding Arab armies said, no, 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 we cannot accept the restoration of the Jewish state. That's unacceptable. That's too humiliating for us. That's too threatening to our theological, philosophical paradigm that Islam is going to be the new chosen people to the world and the real inheritors of the land. And the Jews have to be, we thought they're going to be wandering the earth forever, cursed, despised, rejected by God. And so what does it mean that they've been returned to their land? Is God now having favor on them? That doesn't make sense. If you believe he didn't have favor on them and did break his covenant with them. Therefore, it must be an evil that needs to be destroyed. Otherwise, it's just too threatening. Too threatening. So, that was the plan. And in the process of trying to get rid of the Jewish state, yes, many Arabs living in the land were displaced, predominantly by the surrounding Arab armies telling them, leave, get out, and come back once we've thrown all the Jews into the sea. But it didn't work out that way. So people think the Nakba, the catastrophe, is the Jews came in, displaced everyone, and now we have this problem, and they stole the land. No. No. The displacement occurred when the surrounding Arab army said, we cannot accept in Israel. We cannot accept a 2-state solution, which is what was the plan under the UN partition proposal, which again the Jews accepted. But more than that, it's not just the displacement was a result of the Arabs trying to annihilate the Jews. But more than that, the word Nakba, the catastrophe which people think is about the displacement, was not about that. It was about the fact that they didn't succeed in their war of killing the Jewish state. You see how twisted it is? You see how sick it is? We could do a whole series on how words have lost their meaning and been twisted and turned on their head. It's one of the great problems of this conflict, the twisting of the meaning of words. It's the same thing with the whole use of the term Palestinian. The concept was created not because they care about some kind of Palestinian state and nationalism. It's because it's just a cynical ploy to try and win over the hearts and minds of people in the West. To say, to build up this narrative, this false narrative, that they're dispossessed and they really are the indigenous people to the land, and if they can just have their Palestinian state and have the land given back to them, then it'll be fine, and they don't really have an issue with the Jews. It's just because they just want to live there peacefully, and it's nothing hateful. But of course, that's completely ahistorical. That flies in the face of what history tells us about the Palestinian cause. The very simple proof of the matter is that if you were to ask any Palestinian leader, past or present, seriously, would you prefer a Palestinian state from the river to the sea, but you're going to have Jewish control of one little area, or Islamic conquest from another country takes over the entire area, but it's under Islamic control, but no free Palestine, no Palestinian state? They'd choose the latter. And whether it's the leaders of Hamas, the PLO, they've all said this, past and present. They were happy to be part of southern Syria. If they would have won the war, the surrounding Arab armies would have won the war of 1948, then you would have seen Israel just be part of Jordan, Syria, and Egypt, and Lebanon. So words have been twisted, and we mustn't fall for it. It's not acceptable anymore to be uneducated about these issues. It's not acceptable because there's too much ignorance out there, there's too much falsehood, and we all have a duty to become ambassadors for the truth. Do not be intimidated by the lies of the other side, by the attempt to shame the Jewish state. There is nothing shameful about the Jewish state. There's everything right, everything to be proud of. And therefore, we have to keep sharing this. So please